When there's internal self-censorship, who needs to restrict the First Amendment? From The Intercept, the New York Times instructed journalists covering Israel's war on the Gaza Strip to restrict the use of the terms genocide, ethnic cleansing, and to avoid using the phrase occupied territory when describing Palestinian land, according to a copy of an internal memo obtained by The Intercept. Now why would that be a problem? Why would these words genocide, ethnic cleansing, and occupied territory be a problem? Let's take a look at dictionary.com and see what those words mean. Genocide, the deliberate and systematic extermination of a national, racial, political, or cultural group. This from Time magazine a month ago. The science is clear, over 30,000 people have died in Gaza. The first shock was the number of people killed in Israel, 1,200 in a day, October 7th. But in the months since, the world has been taken aback by the number of deaths reported out of Gaza, 30,000 through the end of February. That sounds a bit like genocide to me. Let's take a look at ethnic cleansing. The elimination of an unwanted ethnic group or groups from a society, as by genocide or forced emigration. It seems like both of those things are going on in the Gaza Strip right now. Occupied. I tried searching for occupied territory. It returned no results in dictionary.com. But the term occupied, one of the definitions, the third listed definition is taken possession of and controlled by a hostile military force. This is not a new term that's being applied to Gaza. This has been considered occupied territory for quite some time. So why would that be a problem? Well, let's read on. The memo also instructs reporters not to use the word Palestine, except in very rare cases, and to steer clear of the term refugee camps to describe areas of Gaza historically settled by displaced Palestinians expelled from other parts of Palestine during previous Israeli-Arab wars. The areas are recognized by the United Nations as refugee camps and house hundreds of thousands of registered refugees. And to be fair, let's hear what the response was from the Times. Issuing guidance like this to ensure accuracy, consistency, and nuance in how we cover the news is standard practice, said Charlie Statlander, a Times spokesperson. Across all our reporting, including complex events like this, we take care to ensure language choices are sensitive, current, and clear to our audiences. Let's read that last part again. We take care to ensure our language choices are sensitive, current, and clear to our audiences. Yes, but you're telling these people to not refer to refugee camps that have been recognized by an authority like the United Nations as being refugee camps, to not use the term refugee camps to describe those refugee camps. I think there's a little inconsistency here in the policy. And according to The Intercept, despite the memo's framing as an effort to not employ incendiary language to describe killings on all sides, such language has been used repeatedly to describe attacks against Israelis by Palestinians, and almost never in the case of Israel's large-scale killing of Palestinians. The large-scale killing that is going on right now. In a section with the headline Genocide and Other Incendiary Language, the guidance says, genocide has a specific definition in international law. In our own voice, we should generally use it only in the context of those legal parameters. We should also set a high bar for allowing others to use it as an accusation, whether in quotations or not, unless they are making a substantive argument based on the legal definition. Let's take a look at that international law definition of genocide. From Wikipedia, Genocide Convention. The Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide, or the Genocide Convention, is an international treaty that criminalizes genocide and obligates state parties to pursue the enforcement of its prohibition. It was the first legal instrument to codify genocide as a crime and the first human rights treaty unanimously adopted by the United Nations General Assembly in 1948. The convention defines genocide as any of five, quote, acts committed with intent to destroy, in whole or in part, a national, ethnical, racial, or religious group. These five acts include killing members of the group, causing them serious bodily or mental harm, imposing living conditions intended to destroy the group, preventing births, and forcibly transferring children out of the group. Victims are targeted because of their real or perceived membership of a group, not randomly. The convention further criminalizes complicity, attempt, or incitement of its commission. Member states are prohibited from engaging in genocide and obligated to pursue the enforcement of this prohibition. All perpetrators are to be tried regardless of whether they are private individuals, public officials, or political leaders with sovereign immunity. And this definition has been adopted by the International Criminal Court. The article continues, pointing out, in the cases of describing occupied territory and the status of refugees in Gaza, the time-style guidelines run counter to norms established by the United Nations and international humanitarian law. On the term Palestine, a widely used name for both the territory and the UN-recognized state, the Times memo contains blunt instructions. Do not use in datelines, routine text, or headlines, except in very rare cases such as when the United Nations General Assembly elevated Palestine to a non-member observer state, or references to historic Palestine. The Times guidance resembles that of the Associated Press style book. The memo directs journalists not to use the phrase refugee camps to describe long-standing refugee settlements in Gaza. While termed refugee camps, the refugee centers in Gaza are developed and densely populated neighborhoods dating to the 1948 war. Refer to them as neighborhoods or areas, and if further context is necessary, explain how they have historically been called refugee camps. The United Nations recognizes 8 refugee camps in the Gaza Strip. As of last year, before the war started, the areas were home to more than 600,000 registered refugees. Many are descendants of those who fled to Gaza after being forcibly expelled from their homes in the 1948 Arab-Israeli War, which marked the founding of the Jewish state and mass dispossession of hundreds of thousands of Palestinians. The memo's instructions on the use of the term occupied territories says, quote, when possible, avoid the term and be specific, e.g. Gaza, the West Bank, etc., as each has a slightly different status. The Intercept follows up with this quote, the United Nations, along with much of the world, considers Gaza, the West Bank, and East Jerusalem to be occupied Palestinian territories seized by Israel in the 1967 Arab-Israeli War. And I think this is an important comment. The admonition against the use of the term occupied territories, said a Times staffer, obscures the reality of the conflict, feeding into the U.S. and Israeli insistence that the conflict began on October 7th. So I brought this to you because I think this is indicative of a problem that does not get discussed enough. And this story explains why it doesn't get discussed enough.